latest technological innovations today.
And you don't have to pay.
Expert panels with advanced degrees are sure to satisfy your curiosity.
Since we mention it's free.
And if you think you'll find a better time than this, then come on down and test your hypothesis. Cause you're gonna learn a lot if you wanna stay down at the Science Cafe.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. We hope you enjoyed your holiday. And welcome to our March 2021 Nashua Science Cafe of New Hampshire. I'm Rick Irving, and it is my pleasure to be your host and moderator for this evening's session entitled Digital Privacy and Online Security, What You Should Know. We will discuss not only what you should know, but also we will delve into what can you do about it. How concerned should we be about privacy and security online? And if we are concerned, is there anything we can do to better protect ourselves and the people with whom we are communicating online? Now at Science Cafe, we bring together the public with our experts to host an intelligent exchange of ideas based on scientific discussion. As always, the key to the discussion is the question submitted by you, our audience, to our panel of experts on tonight's topic. With regards to your questions, starting right now and for the duration of the program, you should use the comment section of Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching us tonight, to send in your questions or ideas. Please be succinct with your submissions, and if you would, please include your name and the location you're watching us from tonight. We will get to as many of your questions as we can within our allotted time, which should be around 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, so now I would like to introduce our panel. I will briefly introduce them and then give them an opportunity to tell us more about themselves and their background. We will start with Nora Draper. Nora is an associate professor of communication at the University of New Hampshire. She has authored a number of articles that have been published in several significant industry publications and magazines. And she is also the author. First book is entitled The Identity Trade, Selling Privacy and Reputation Online. Fascinating topic. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you very much.
So tell us about yourself and your background.
Sure. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here to talk about privacy and security online. So my research focuses on the intersection of technology and society. So I think about the ways in which the technology that we have influences things like social interactions, but also how society influences technology, how it's created, and how it's used. And for about the last decade, I've been interested in questions of privacy and surveillance, particularly as it relates to the digital world. And so I've been involved in things like national surveys where we've really tried to understand how people think about their privacy online, to what extent they sort of care about their privacy online, and what their kind of feelings are about their ability to protect themselves and make choices that are consistent with their privacy preferences.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you tonight. We're glad you're here. Next, we have Azeddine Jakib, or AJ. AJ is the Chief Technology Officer at Bredy Network Management Corporation in the Boston area. They provide complete IT solutions to their customer base. AJ has over 35 years working in the information technology and service industries. His expertise is wide-ranging, especially in cloud, system security, and cyber technologies. Welcome, AJ. Tell us about yourself.
Thanks for having me. Happy to help. So I've been doing this again for 35 years. My main focus the last 15 to 20 years has been around security, and especially working with the healthcare providers, healthcare verticals and insurance company, and as well as banking industry. And the security and the cybersecurity has been a big factor in enhancing their way of doing business. So our focus lately has been to help businesses secure their data, both internally as well as in the outside world from attacks coming from different countries.
Great, thank you. So glad you could be with us tonight. And our third panelist is David Kotz. David is a professor in the computer science department at Dartmouth College here in New Hampshire. He got his AB in computer science and physics from Dartmouth College and his PhD in computer science from Duke University. He also has an extensive experience in the security technology areas. He has done research in security and privacy in smart homes, as well as pervasive computing for healthcare and wireless networks. And he has published over 230 papers. David, you've been busy. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. I've been very busy. I've been involved in security and privacy for probably the last 15 or 20 years, and with a particular focus on health-related applications, especially mobile and wearable health technology, and most recently an interest in smart homes. And I have a guest here today as well helping me out. I'm sorry about that. So I'm especially interested in hearing from your guests who might be installing smart home technology or might have questions about to what degree that might affect the security of the information or the people in their home or the privacy of them and their household.
Great, thank you. We're glad you could join us here tonight. So now we're going to delve into the meat of the Science Cafe. The first question we're going to let Nora address first. And the question is, most people understand that companies such as Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon are tracking us on the web. But who are the unseen data broker companies that are behind the scenes using this data?
Great. Well, thank you for the question. So we're, I think a lot of the time when we're kind of going around doing our business online, we'll see things like advertisements pop up, and it'll be, something that we maybe looked at on a website previously, or maybe even something that we kind of mentioned in conversation with our friends, and we'll think like, why am I seeing this pair of shoes? Or why am I seeing this flight to London? Why is this being advertised to me? And that is largely the work of data brokers. And so I'm going to talk here specifically about advertising and marketing data brokers. There are data brokers who do all kinds of different things, but I'm mostly interested in the ones who work in the sort of advertising and marketing space. So these are companies basically that collect information about us from various sources. So they might look at our shopping habits. They might look at publicly available information about where we live, or if you own a home, or if you're a renter, those kinds of things. They might collect information from loyalty cards, so the cards that you have at various stores. And they combine all that information to create consumer profiles, which they then kind of either sell to businesses to help them with their own marketing, or they help businesses to then sort of target advertisements based on what they know about us. So some of these companies are companies that we kind of maybe are familiar with, companies like Equifax or Nielsen, who work in a bunch of different areas, including this area of data brokers. And then some are companies that probably, people don't necessarily know the names of, companies like Axiom or Epsilon, and other companies like that we may not have heard of. And that's because, they're operating kind of behind the scenes, collecting information about us, aggregating that information, and then coming to conclusions about who we are, what we might be interested in, based on that information.
Wow, fascinating. Thank you. So the next question, we're going to let AJ handle first. We hear in the news about cities, companies, other municipalities being threatened by malware and ransomware. Should ordinary citizens on the internet be concerned with these threats? And what is the difference between malware and ransomware?
All right, so let's define the two terms first, the malware and the ransomware. I mean, malware, self-explanatory. It's anything that will cause or harm your computer in any shape or form. Usually it comes in a form of an attachment. You click on it and it filters through your computer. It causes you pretty much harm to your computer. Ransomware is pretty much a malware that would take over your computer or your files, your system, and the only way to get rid of it is to pay a ransom to whoever sent you that ransomware. So we've seen an increased number of ransomware in the last 5-6 years, and we've had a lot of our clients get attacked by these ransomwares. The best defense to these type of ransomware and malwares is, and I've talked to Scott about that briefly yesterday, is educating the users. If an email comes to you from anybody, you have no idea who that person is, don't open it. Do not open an email that's coming from somebody that you have no idea it is. If you want to understand it, just hover over the hyperlink. And I tell people, hover over the hyperlink. If you see it coming from somebody you're not aware of, delete it, get rid of it, don't open it, because the minute you open it, that's it. And what happens in a lot of organizations is if you work for a company and you open that ransomware, it tends to filter to the entire network. So it affects not just you, but it might bring an entire organization down. It happened to a school up in the Sunapee area. It brought the entire system down for almost 2 weeks. Again, the hackers ask for money. If you don't pay it, you're doomed. The fallback is whether you have a backup or not. And most home users don't have a lot of backups. They don't understand what a backup is. I mean, you might back up your financial data and so forth, but overall, most people have their data stored on their computer. So if you have malware, ransomware, pretty much you lose everything else in between. You have no recourse of going back to your data. So again, the best option for anybody is educating themselves, educating their kids, educating their families and their members to not open any email coming from anybody else that you have no idea who they are. I hope this helps.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Now, I think people are sort of under the misconception that opening an email versus opening an attachment would be two completely different things. So you don't even open the email.
So some emails come in a form of a hyperlink. So you have the attachment that could have a virus, but sometimes you have a hyperlink that is embedded into the email. So once you open that hyperlink, it has a download mechanism that goes into your computer, and it can affect the rest of your system.
Right. And are attacks against individuals common, or
very, very common? I mean, these hackers will target anybody who's going to pay them a ransom. I mean, whether they make $100 or $2,000 or $30,000, it's irrelevant to them. They send these viruses. It's a fishing expedition, pretty much. You send it and you wait. If somebody contacts you, then they pay you. If they don't contact you, then you're just looking for the next available victim.
Wow. Okay, that's scary. Thank you. And the next question will be for David. This week, Google announced the new Nest Smart Hub, and one of the features will be the ability to track sleep and breathing patterns during the night. Can you explain the difference between the health benefits and the privacy concern trade-offs?
Well, it certainly is an interesting trade-off. This kind of technology is available from several vendors now, not just Google. The idea is that some device or app can monitor your sleep-related behavior. Breathing is one example, movement is another, and provide you some feedback about your sleep. A lot of people feel that they're not getting good sleep and are interested in improving their sleep so that they feel better, maybe are healthier in other ways. And so there's a lot of potential health benefits there, and people can learn a lot from observations about their sleep that will allow them to better prepare themselves for sleep or better prepare their environment for better sleep. And that leads to a lot of other health benefits. In fact, I wear a ring. This is actually a digital ring from a company called Oura, O-U-R-A, that has a lot of technology in it that measures my sleep and provides me a feedback in the morning about how my sleep went, and gives me advice about how I might better prepare myself for sleep the next day. I feel that that kind of technology has great potential health advantages. On the other hand, where's that information going, and what are they doing with it in addition to providing you feedback? Those are key questions and something you really have to ask them by reading their privacy policy carefully before you choose the technology, and also by configuring the device or the app or the service in a way to limit the amount of information that might be exposed to people you don't want it exposed to. So some of these services allow you to share the information, for example, with a spouse or a partner or a caregiver or a physician or a therapist or somebody like that, and that can provide some benefits. On the other hand, you want to make sure that you're not spreading that or allowing access to that information beyond some trusted group of personal caregivers. So it's a complicated issue, but you need to be basically weighing what benefits you might get in terms of your health in this example versus the potential risks to sharing information with some company or other people who might use it in ways you don't appreciate.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. So our next question from Facebook comes from Courtney and Mike from Asheville, North Carolina. How safe are platforms like 1Password in preventing password security issues?
Is that for anyone in particular?
Yes, yes, anyone.
Go for it, AJ.
I mean, 1Password. I'm not sure if people are familiar with the 1Password software. It's a software that allows people to preserve and keep their password in a safe location, and it's as safe as it can. But again, you have to put some mechanism around the safety of the passwords. I mean, you put your banking accounts there. I mean, we use it actually in a lot of our client accounts. But the way we use it is different from what a typical user would use it for. We use it with what we call the multi-factor authentication process. So we don't just rely on a username and a password. We rely on a second factor authenticated method. So we put in our username and password, and then it will send you, I'm sure you guys seen this on your banking accounts, it will send you a token that you have to validate who you are a second time. But as far as whether the 1Password is a good software, I think it's one of the best softwares out there that preserves your password and your information intact.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that if it's all right, Rick.
Please.
I'm a 1Password user, more of an individual, not an enterprise like AJ was talking about, and I've been very pleased with it. I chose it over some of its, there are several products like this. LastPass is another popular one. And basically, it's a place to store all of the passwords for all of your websites and apps and things like that. And also to automatically generate extremely strong random passwords. And I like it because it makes it very easy to automatically fill a password from the 1Password collection. So I don't have to remember or type the password. And that makes it much more likely that I'll choose a very long and complicated password, which is hard for an adversary to crack. And furthermore, at least for websites, the nice thing is that when I go to a website and I ask 1Password, okay, please autofill my username and password, if I'm not actually at the correct website, it won't recognize it and it won't fill the username and password. One of the biggest risks out there is that people will set up spoofing websites that look a lot like the real website that have maybe a misspelled domain name. So chase.com is a common bank, right? Big bank. But somebody might set up chase.com, right? A little extra E in there, or chase with an extra A in there. And so somebody who accidentally types the wrong address will land at this malicious website and not realize it, and they'll type their username and password in there. But 1Password will say chase.com is not the actual bank, and it won't fill in my chase.com password. Right. So it allows me to, it provides the passwords for me, provides very long and random passwords. It makes it easier because I don't have to remember them. I don't have to type them. And so I have hundreds of passwords in 1Password. and I can share them with my spouse. And so she can actually log into our bank account as well on her computer, and I can log in on my iPhone and my iPad, all with the same password collection. Now, the key, of course, is that one password that locks up the whole collection. The key, the combination to that safe, better not get lost. And so,
yeah, just going back to what I said earlier, you have all your passwords there, but you want to make sure that you're protecting the one password mechanism. You have to make sure that it's protected, because if it gets in the wrong hands, then you lose everything.
You lose everything, exactly. Right. So I'm very careful. I have a very careful password for the one password. And actually on my laptop, I can use my fingerprint to unlock the entire password collection. And so most of the time when I log into a place, a website, a secure website, which might be my email or my bank or something like that, I just hold my finger on the password on the fingerprint reader, and I'm in. So it's very convenient. It's easier than passwords, but it's far more secure. So I highly recommend it. It's worth paying for something like that.
Wow.
It's fairly affordable. It's I think it's $5, Dave, a month for end users. For consumer, $10. So it's fairly affordable.
Yeah.
And
I think I pay the yearly price, which is on average a little less than that.
Right.
But yeah, something like that.
Wow. Very interesting. So that was an excellent question from Courtney, and I will make sure I talk to her about that later, because Courtney is my daughter.
Oh, here we go.
Thank you.
Planted question there. Okay.
Somebody in the audience, right? All right. So for the next question from Facebook, Andrew Porat, what do you think of the financial apps such as Mint, which offer one place to see and organize all of your accounts? You need to give them access to your accounts. I don't know Mint.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've seen their advertising. I've been to be honest, I've been somewhat skeptical of such things, a little bit nervous about, even though I put all my passwords in one place, I've been always a little bit nervous about putting all my bank accounts and brokerage and so forth all in one vendor. Because like AJ said, that gets broken, everything's broken. On the other hand, I use Quicken, which is a desktop app for managing my finances. And I'm not entirely sure. I probably should look at this more closely, but I think they have access indirectly to a lot of my bank accounts, because then they can load all that information into a view for me in the desktop app, not in the browser, but in the desktop. So I have mixed feelings about this one.
So the difference between what you said, David, with the Quicken or any financial applications is it's local to your machine. It's pulling information from the web. This Mint here is an application on the web. So you're putting all your information out there for somebody else to maintain it on your behalf. Now it goes back to what David said earlier. If Mint has this app on the phone, or if you go to the website and you mistype the wrong password and you end up putting all your eggs in that basket, it's the wrong basket, then it might cause some serious harm.
Yeah, so I think you're right that was the difference between something like Mint, a web-based product, versus Quicken, a desktop-based product. I think that's shifting. I think Quicken is increasingly involving the Quicken servers in the updates, but I'm not really sure.
I mean, they're going that route because of what they call the MRR, the monthly recurring revenue. They're looking for people to pay them a monthly fee for all their services.
So mixed feelings on that one, Rick.
Right.
Okay. So David, how should we address your guest that has shown up once or twice?
Sebastian is
Sebastian.
I think he's eager to go outside, but of course he'll just want to come back inside. So
maybe he wants to answer a question or two.
Okay.
Okay. Our next question is from Stacy Samoji. How safe is using a service like LifeLock?
Not familiar with that one.
LifeLock pretty much monitors your credit report. So the way it works is you put in the information. If somebody opens an account on your behalf, or somebody does something with the credit information, it sends you an alert. Hey, somebody's doing this. Now, is it worth it? Absolutely. But you have to keep a close eye. I mean, they will call you. They will let you know, hey, somebody's doing X, Y, and Z on your behalf. Are you approving of this? And you can. I have a lot of friends, a lot of colleagues who use this service, and they're pretty happy about it. I myself, I don't use it, but I've heard good things about it.
Okay. And I think this one is also from Stacy. Alexa, and I assume similar devices, has answered when not asked a question. So how much are they listening to us? Good question.
Big Brother is watching, so I can tell you.
Yeah, this is of course an emerging product area. Alexa is the Amazon product. Siri is the Apple product. Hey Google is the Google product. Bing is Microsoft, and Bixby is Samsung, right? And these are all voice-based assistants. So you can ask them a question using your voice, and the assistant will be listening on your phone or on a device that you might have in your home, like an Apple HomePod or similar Amazon Echo or similar devices. And then your voice will be captured by that device and sent up to the cloud, to the vendor's computers, recognized. They'll try to translate your voice into a question, into words, and then look up the answer to that question, and then provide it back to the device, which might be your phone, and then speak it back to you. And of course, it's tremendously convenient because a lot of people, maybe you're busy with your hands, you're cooking or you're changing diapers or something like that, and it's a lot easier to use your voice. On the other hand, all of these services send your voice to a remote computer somewhere else. So in order to answer the question, they have to send your voice to another server. And so that means that the questions you ask or the commands you speak, for example, to start and stop a movie or to play some music or to shop online, will be sent to a company. And so then you're subject to their privacy practices and their security practices as to whether that information is perhaps going to be used in a way you don't approve. The question was directly about, are they always listening? And the answer is yes. I mean, if they're going to be able to answer you in any moment, they have to be listening all the time. And they have to be essentially thinking, is that voice? Is that speech? Okay, it sounds like speech. Okay, is that a question? Is that something I'm supposed to listen to? Okay, I guess it is. And so then they'll try to answer. And of course, they're listening for the trigger word, like Hey Google or Alexa. And sometimes they'll misunderstand and answer when they're not supposed to. And so there is a risk to installing or enabling any of that software on any of your platforms. But by and large, and I've talked to the people who have implemented most of these, by and large, they have done a good job and they are well-intentioned and they're really trying hard to A, capture it only when you want them to, and B, to properly handle the information and not expose your questions or your conversation inappropriately. But there is a risk.
So I'm going to tie what David just said to what Nora had talked about earlier. So when your voice goes to the cloud and everything else, they learn about your habits, shopping habits, things you do on a regular basis, and that is used in a marketing campaign down the road based on your criteria. So just keep that in mind.
It's certainly possible. I guess the question is whether any given vendor does that, and I suspect that some do and some don't. And my impression is that there are. I won't name names as to which vendor I think might do that and might not, but I think some of them are more likely to use that for marketing purposes,
right,
than others are not. I don't know, Nora, if you know anything about that space or the privacy behaviors of those companies?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's kind of interesting, I think, about a lot of the voice companies is that one of the things that they seem to be trying to do is to make assumptions about people's kind of emotions, the way that they're feeling, and those types of things based on voice, which is a really kind of I find it a troubling area. There's not necessarily a lot of sort of scientific basis for the idea that things like our voices or our facial expressions can kind of reveal a lot about our emotions, and yet these companies can be making really kind of important and consequential assumptions about who we are and what's going on in our lives based on those things. So I mean, I don't have Alexa or other kind of devices like that in my house, and part of the reason is because I just am not sure how that information is going to be used. And of course, our voice is biometric, right? That's kind of connected to us. Very difficult to kind of change if you needed to or wanted to. And so I have a lot of sort of privacy questions about what happens with that information, but also kind of the assumptions that are being made based on that information.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was another great question. And our next question, again, is from Courtney in Asheville, North Carolina. What are the potential long-term consequences we should be thinking about with advertisers using our personal data? I don't mind today if some ads are targeted to me, but is there a bigger picture privacy issue we should be considering?
So, I mean, I can start a little bit on this one. I think, when we think about this question of the ways in which our personal information is being aggregated and used to serve us things like advertisements, I think often that's kind of the most maybe benign use of this information. But it's still, I mean, we think like, well, if a company knows what kind of toilet paper I like and it sends me coupons for that toilet paper, like, that's great. That's super helpful. I would definitely want that. But we need to sort of think as well about the ways in which not only this information can be used to sort of include people in marketing campaigns, but also can be used to exclude people. And, I mean, Facebook has, for example, gotten into some trouble for excluding certain demographic groups from seeing advertisements on its platform. And so that's one way that, we might think about, okay, I don't mind being sort of included in an advertising campaign if it's something I'm interested in, but how would I feel if I was excluded from an advertising campaign because of something that a company knows about me or thinks it knows about me? And so, I think this goes back to something that AJ said when he was talking about security, which is the idea that, if you click on a piece of malware and it infects your computer, if you're part of a network, it's not only your computer that is compromised, right? It's everybody on that network. And privacy works very much the same way. We tend to think of privacy as being very individualistic. What can I do to protect myself, right? What can I do to make sure that my information is protected? But a lot of the time, we need to think about privacy as much more collective. So it's not necessarily about the information that I'm revealing and what that might mean for me, but what it might mean for other people. So while I might be really comfortable with a company kind of targeting me based on my personal information, other people might not. And my decision to reveal personal information implicates other people. And I think, maybe the clearest example of this is something like DNA testing, right? And the sort of like genetic companies that are popping up where you can send your genetic information in, and it'll tell you, information about your family tree or information about diseases that you might have, those kinds of things. Well, when you do that, you implicate not only yourself, but other members of your family who may or may not have made the same sort of privacy calculations and want the same sort of privacy risks that you do. So I think, the question of kind of this was posed in terms of what are the potential long-term consequences, which I think is an important question, but also what are the sort of social consequences, right? We can't just think about protecting ourselves and making choices for ourselves, but also maybe making choices for other people as well.
Wow, great, very interesting. Thank you. Next question. Many of us use Facebook to share personal family information and photos. What are the real risks in doing this?
Well, I mean, I'm going to let someone else kind of pick up on this, but I think one of the things that again kind of this points to is this question of the social aspects of privacy and issues of consent. I think a lot of the times when we're sharing things, we again think about our own privacy calculus and whether or not we are sort of personally comfortable with the decisions that we're making. But of course, when you're sharing pictures of family and other types of things, you certainly want to be thinking about how other people might make those decisions. And, especially when you're thinking about young children, right? If you're posting pictures on Facebook or Instagram or wherever of young children, you're making a decision on their behalf about what their privacy or what their digital footprint is going to look like that they may or may not thank you for down the road.
I know my children have asked me to, not to post pictures of them anymore because they have they're teenagers or older, and they're not, don't necessarily want me sharing information about their lives. Yeah, I would, about Facebook in general. It's one of those platforms that's free, right? And why is it free? It's because you're the product. I mean, they're selling you and your eyeballs to someone else. And so just keep that in mind about Facebook or anything else like it, I suppose. It's a great service. I enjoy it. I'm a Facebook user, although somewhat increasingly reluctant, I must say, because of some of the many practices for which they've been rightly criticized. And I'm concerned about the way that the kinds of information they collect and the way that they're using it. So I think it's something, I can't give you a definitive, thoughtful answer at this time, but I would say read more about it, think more about it, recognize what they're doing with the information they collect. It's not necessarily to your advantage all the time.
Right.
Okay.
I'm just going to add one more thing about this. I mean, we've interviewed folks who we were about to hire, but a quick search online comes up with something on Facebook or some social media platform, and we just, if somebody's posting things on the social media for the entire world to see, you cannot leverage that person as a consultant to work in the technology field. So
there are plenty of examples of people whose careers, and that includes teenagers, have been significantly harmed by information that has been posted about them. Maybe rightly so. I mean, that there's some aspect of their character that has been discovered and caused them to lose opportunities as a result of it. Or in some cases, probably not rightly so, right? A quick search will give you an impression of somebody, which may not be entirely fair, right? Sometimes information is taken out of context. And so there are risks, even if you're not a user of some of these platforms, as Nora was getting at, because of the potential for someone else to be posting false or misleading information about you. So it's very complicated and sometimes concerning.
Yeah, excellent point. Okay, next question. Do virtual private networks, VPNs, really work to protect us?
Sounds like one for AJ.
I can certainly address that. So a virtual private network is pretty much a secure connection between two sites or two locations, two endpoints. So if you're going from your house, let's take Netflix as an example. Netflix wanted to secure the connection between you and them. They will say, use this virtual private network to connect to our site to do whatever you need to do. It is secure. What I've seen out there is some sites would sell you a VPN connection to browse the internet. But keep in mind, you're browsing the internet through their own connection. So any information is filtering through them. Is it safe? It's safe between you and them. Is it safe outside that? It's hard to say, because the only thing that is encrypted is the tunnel between yourself your computer, and the other entity. That's the only thing that is secure. Anything you do outside of that is not secure. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't want to get too.
Many people use a VPN with their employer. So in fact,
right.
I'm connected right now to the Dartmouth VPN, and
right.
I trust Dartmouth for lots of things, but including for their VPN. So the traffic, all my internet traffic, is connecting now through Dartmouth, and then going from there to everywhere else. And so anyone who might be observing the traffic in and out of my home, or in and out of my on my Wi-Fi, won't see any information. They won't glean even where it's going, right? But you're right, Dartmouth could, and I trust them not to act on that. But if I were to buy a VPN service from some fly-by-night operator, then yes, I have to trust that operator not to be inspecting my traffic, or at least its endpoints, to learn something about me.
So again, just keep in mind, the only thing that is encrypted is the traffic between the two entities. Once so you're connected to the Dartmouth site. Once you connect there, if you browse the internet through the Dartmouth site, then you're exposed.
Well, most web connections these days are individually encrypted as well, and so if I'm connecting to my bank, there's an end-to-end encryption between my laptop and my bank, and then there's also an additional layer of encryption created by the VPN, and my Wi-Fi network adds another layer of encryption on that. And so it depends on what you're trying to protect. One of the benefits of VPNs is that an observer doesn't know even which vendor you're connecting to, which website you're connecting to, let alone what you're communicating with that vendor. So, I could be going to Google, to Apple, to Netflix, to Amazon, and they won't know any of that, because it's just all they see is traffic between me and Dartmouth right now. And so depending on what you're trying to protect about your traffic, VPNs can be very useful.
Okay, another great question. Next, everybody hears about cookies. What are cookies? Are they harmful, and should we accept them?
That's a good question. Nora, you want to take that one?
I mean, I can start with what cookies are. So my understanding is that cookies were developed as a way to actually assist with online shopping. So they are kind of, and one of the computer scientists can actually give a clear definition of this, but it's a little bit of code that's dropped in your browser when you visit a particular site, and it helps the browser to kind of recognize when you return to that site. So if we think about the context of online shopping, my understanding is that the reason that this was important and helpful was that you would put something in your shopping cart, and then you could kind of continue shopping and add more things to your shopping cart and then check out, as opposed to having to put something in your shopping cart and buy it, because the site couldn't necessarily remember or recognize that you were a returning or continuing customer. And so, now cookies are used in all kinds of different ways. And when it comes to advertising, one of the things that they do is to help indicate to advertisers that you have been to another site. So if we think about that pair of shoes or whatever it was that I mentioned earlier that kind of follows you around the web, what cookies are doing are communicating with advertisers who are engaged in a process of real-time bidding. So basically, you show up at a website, a whole bunch of advertisers kind of say, oh, this is a person who has looked at trips and shoes and toilet paper and all these kinds of things, and they bid, and then an advertisement shows up on your in your browser to based on who won that kind of auction. And those are kind of advertising cookies. But there's also these kind of utility cookies that sites need, as I understand it. Again, the computer scientists can explain this better, to kind of have the websites function. And so if you go to a website, sometimes, like if you're traveling overseas in Europe, or maybe if you're in Europe right now, I guess that's possible. because we're all virtual. And you look at like, if you get a privacy, if you enter a website and you have to kind of agree to their terms and service and their privacy policies before engaging with that website, you might have a bunch of different types of cookies that you can accept or decline. And so you might decide that you're going to accept the cookies that kind of allow the site to function, but decline the cookies that allow advertisers to talk to you. So maybe that's helpful, and I hope one of our other panelists can clarify some of what I just said.
Great.
I think you covered it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in nutshell, those what cookies do.
I think the reason, Nora, you mentioned Europe, the reason why people are seeing so many requests for accepting cookies is because now the European General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, requires vendors that interact with anyone in Europe to install all kinds of new privacy protections. And one of those is to allow people to opt out of this kind of tracking. And cookies are one technology that's used for the kind of advertising related tracking that you mentioned. And there's a lot more detail there, of course, but that's why basically every website now asks you. And unfortunately, most websites, you kind of have to say yes. It's like either you accept or you just don't use their service, which is not much of a choice. That's another problem. But that's why you're starting to see that. And for the most part, as far as I'm concerned, for the most part, it's pretty harmless. You're going to see more advertisements about shoes, I guess. In your case, Nora, probably for me, it's camera equipment or something like that. That's what I seem to see because I shop for that. But it's, okay, whatever.
And I think, David's point about choice, I think, is a really important one. And I think in part because we are just increasingly to kind of contend with issues of privacy, we're increasingly asked to make choices, right? And we've already been asked, should I put an Alexa in my house? Should I share pictures of my family on Facebook? And so, those are maybe kind of big choices, but every website you go to, you're asked, to basically make a choice about whether or not you want to engage with that website, how you want to engage with that website. And I mean, if you think about kind of the cognitive load of making all of those choices, if we were actually to kind of think through and make those choices every single time we were confronted, if you thought about every single website, do I want this website to track me? Do I want, all of these things? Like we would be spending our whole time making choices about privacy. And, it's just not possible. And not to mention the fact that, I think someone asked about long-term consequences. I think a lot of the time we just don't know. We don't know what a site like Facebook is kind of planning down the road. And so, I think a lot of privacy policy, a lot of privacy regulation is built around this idea that we should be able to make choices. But whether or not we have the time or the kind of knowledge to make informed choices in ways that are actually consistent with how we think about and feel about our own privacy, I think is a very different question.
Yeah, some of my privacy expert colleagues have pointed out that the notice and consent model, which is the kind of the standard model that's been around for a couple of decades, basically, you give people notice, this is what information we're collecting, and then we ask you to consent to that collection or use of the data, is basically broken because the notice is, as if you've ever tried to read a privacy policy, goes on for pages and pages and pages, and it's very complicated. And even then, it doesn't provide enough detail to actually help you really understand what's happening. And then the cognitive load in actually thinking about that and making choices is too much for most people. And usually there's not much of a choice. It's either all or nothing. So it's basically broken. And so the research that's underway in the privacy-oriented technology space is trying to come up with better approaches that provide people better privacy protection to begin with and more meaningful and actionable choice, which is not, there's no easy answer, which is why you don't see it much yet.
Right.
And I will just say that in the surveys that I've been involved in, again, sort of national surveys over the past 10 years, we see that people's kind of awareness of a lot of things related to digital privacy is kind of improving, but we also see that the majority of people who respond to our surveys either don't know or think that the existence of a privacy policy on a website means that that site is not collecting personal information and is protecting your privacy.
Right.
So, I mean, this is a kind of a clear instance of, we might call it mislabeling, but certainly kind of just a misunderstanding about even what a privacy policy is or what it does. And so, even as David said, even if you knew what it was and you decided you were going to engage with it, it's pages and pages long and it doesn't provide you with a lot of clarity. But a lot of people, maybe even the majority of people, aren't even aware that it's something that they might want to engage with.
Right. So that was a good question, but that was an excellent, informative answer. Thank you very much. Our next question is from Bonnie Guercio. Are Apple products truly safe without antivirus software?
I don't use any software like that, and I only use Apple products. I don't think that's not technically an answer, but I haven't felt a need to install antivirus in decades.
Well, I think you're an informed user, David, but I think in my opinion, I think any product you use, you're better off with an antivirus software that can at least give you some type of protection.
Yeah, that's fair. And I also tend to install unusual kinds of software where the antivirus gets in the way.
Right.
Gets in my way, at least.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, next question from Richard Parent. How essential is antivirus software?
That's a similar question.
Same question, yeah. It is the same. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends how you look at it. I think, best practices out there is you have to have I don't use antivirus on my machine, David. I've never used one. I don't click on everything that I see, but I think for your typical user, an antivirus is something that ought to be considered. I mean, for all the clients we work with, every company has an antivirus protection software on their system, whether it's servers or workstations or laptop. It's just part of the process out there.
Okay. Very interesting question. Managing personal information on the internet is not easy. How can we scrub our personal data, and how much effort does it take?
I don't know how to touch that, but I think it's once your personal data is out there, I think it's out there forever. I'm not aware of any. It might take. It's what they call DNS. It's propagated between different websites, between browsers, between search engines. So I'm not aware of any mechanism where you can go and say, get rid of this data here forever. I don't know about you, Nora or David, but I haven't really come across anything that would help with that process.
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly depends on the type of information that you're talking about. I mean, one of the areas that I've done some work in is non-consensual image sharing, which is also sometimes referred to as revenge porn. And this is an area where, not only is it incredibly difficult to get this kind of material removed from the internet, but oftentimes the websites that host the information or the images or whatever it is will offer what is essentially ransom to have the images removed. And if someone pays that, then it pops up on another site.
Right.
So not only can it be very difficult to get this information removed, but I think sometimes the companies and services that are offering to help get that information removed are not necessarily acting in the best interest of their client, I guess we could call them. And so I think it's a bit of a game of whack-a-mole, unfortunately. And I think there's also reason to be skeptical of anybody who's saying that they can that they could get all this information taken down or
Right.
anything like that.
There's two really interesting trends in this regard, and I think everything you said was correct, Nora. I'm sure, but two things that I've heard about. One is in Europe, part of GDPR is what some people call the right to be forgotten. There are parts of that rule that require companies to delete information, not just remove it, but delete information at your request if it's about you. And I don't know the details, I'm not sure, but that gives people some legal power to do the kinds of things you're talking about, at least within Europe. The second interesting trend I've seen in several recent stories are about newspapers. There's a bit of I'm not sure what the right word is, but there's a bit of an introspection in the newspaper industry. On the one hand, they have many of newspapers decades or hundreds of years of content that they've made available online to everyone because they see that public information is part of what they do. On the other hand, newspapers carry, for example, the police blotter, records of arrests of people and allegations of crimes, for example, that have happened maybe decades ago that are now available with a quick Google search. And yet, perhaps they eventually were acquitted, or perhaps it was even legally expunged from their criminal history, which is possible in some cases. And yet they're haunted by these decades-old crimes, or actually, in many cases, just allegations, right, that turn out not to be true. And so many newspapers now have a formal process where you can submit a request saying, please remove your story from 20 years ago about my arrest for drunk driving or something like that. And they will consider it. And I think there's no clear path forward yet. They're all trying to figure out how to balance the right to information and their mission about providing information to the public versus the right to privacy or, individual rights, I guess, versus societal rights. It's a really interesting challenge.
Wow.
And one of the things I think that's been really interesting in the United States around this is that companies have been oftentimes kind of quicker to move on this than policymakers, in part because of this kind of imperative to balance the right to know with the right to privacy. And so when we think about like histories of arrest and those kinds of things, it might be that you remember, several years back that you would kind of Google someone's name and mugshots would kind of pop up at the top of Google search results. And you don't really see that anymore. And that is for a number of reasons. Google, for example, has decided to downgrade or even delist some of those sites so that they don't show up in the search results anymore. And because of the power that Google has, that essentially makes them invisible, right? So if you can get something kind of delisted from Google, that goes a long way into helping people not kind of stumble across it, right? It doesn't mean the information is gone from the web, but it means people are kind of less likely to come across it. And the other thing was a bunch of the financial services. So I'm not 100% sure of which ones, but I think like Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal said that they were going to stop dealing with payments for these mugshot websites, which basically cut off the funding for these sites. And so what we actually saw was that, well, there was some debate going on in the policy world about, how should we deal with mugshot websites. The companies actually just decided to kind of deal with it on their own. And so what we saw, and I think what David's talking about is newspapers doing something kind of similar here, where they're saying like, okay, is this actually information that we need sort of popping up at the top of search results when someone, when there's a Google search for this person's name? It doesn't mean the information is gone necessarily. It's still in a hard copy of a newspaper or a microfiche somewhere, but it's not quite as easy to kind of come across it.
Right, and I think they have, for example, they maintain access for researchers, right? So if they have a searchable database and you're a researcher or a journalist or something like that, there you might have a legitimate and important reason to know the sort of the truth, the full story, versus just a random searcher. Yeah.
Right, great, thanks. And very much related to those responses, if we have been hacked or scammed, what actions should we take?
AJ?
Ray?
What was the question again? I was in.
If we have been hacked or scammed, what actions should we take?
Well, it depends on what type of hacking you've been exposed to. If your personal computer has been hacked, I mean, your only course of action is, to do the right thing. Figure out what's been hacked, try to recover the data, and make sure no personal information, no personal financial information has been exposed. In organizations like we work with, we were told to contact the FBI first and foremost. So the FBI usually gets in the front line, and then we do our forensic work. You figure out what's been hacked, what course of actions we need to take, and how can we protect the data from being exposed out there to the internet. We had somebody who got hacked. Hacking comes in a lot of forms. One of them was the ransomware. So one of the insurance companies we work with got the ransomware. Somebody clicked on a file and they got hacked. And the folks were in China. They asked pretty much for $500,000 to recover all the data in a matter of, they said, an hour to 2 hours. So we contacted the FBI, going back and forth. We're able to recover the data alone using the backup and some other process. But your course of action, it depends on the circumstances. If it's end user, make sure it doesn't happen to you again. Make sure your financial information is protected. But big organizations, there are different ways of protecting yourself.
Okay, great. So we have our last question from Shyla Jo Nelly. Do phone apps like WhatsApp or TikTok spy on us for foreign countries?
I don't know the answer to that one. I've heard the rumors.
Right.
I mean, WhatsApp is an application owned by, I believe, Facebook.
Yeah.
Right. So anything Facebook has, WhatsApp will have. TikTok, I believe, is a Chinese product. So again, depending on what you do with the information, as long as you don't post anything out there, you're safe. I mean, you usually create a username and password to access TikTok. What could they possibly gather on you unless you're posting videos out there and they watch what trends the videos you watch, and they give you more of that stuff you want. So spying is there. Are they spying on you in terms of wanting your financial data? I think it's more like information to enhance your TikTok show, I believe.
Well, I think it's hard to know what the questioner is trying to get at there, but my general feeling is the old adage that you only post stuff online that you wouldn't mind being on the front page of the newspaper, right? And so if you're only posting content that you feel comfortable everyone in the world seeing, what's the problem? The problem potentially, and it's not specific to WhatsApp or TikTok, but to some apps anyway, is that they're also collecting information that has nothing to do with the content of your use of the app. So for example, some of them will be tracking your location or your instant messaging history or your address book contacts and things like that, and uploading it and using it for some other purpose that's unrelated to what you think the app is all about. And the most common risks there come actually from free apps that are using advertising. So you'll get these apps with a little advertising banner often at the bottom, and that little advertisement kind of pops up. And those advertising libraries, some of them collect information about your smartphone or about your use of the smartphone that goes beyond what the app needs to do whatever it's doing. And some of that information sometimes goes to the advertising vendor and not to the app vendor. And so it may be, in fact, that the app vendor is totally legit and well-behaved, but somehow the advertising vendor is obtaining information about your location or your behavior as measured by other sensors on the phone and using that perhaps for advertising, but perhaps for other things, perhaps selling it to anyone who wants to buy it. So I generally avoid ad-driven apps for that reason, because there have been many examples of misbehaving advertising platforms. But there may be other risks, and I don't have a lot of detailed knowledge about that.
And I would just add, I think David's points are really important, in particular because they avoid what I think is sometimes something that we tend to do, which is to look at other countries and assume that what other countries is doing is worse than what kind of is happening within our own borders. And so, I think we saw this particularly with a lot of the concern around TikTok. It was like, oh my gosh, this app that's owned by a Chinese company has become so popular in the United States, and what might it be doing? Without maybe thinking about what some of the apps that are owned by American companies are doing, which include things absolutely like running location services, even when the app is turned off, even when the app that's not required for the functioning of the app, all those kinds of things. And so I would, I would just kind of caution against some of the kind of scapegoating, I think, that can tend to happen around things that are happening by foreign governments or in foreign countries, and think about, what's happening right here in the United States that we might need to be concerned about.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so before we get to our closing remarks, I want to ask the panel, do you have any parting thoughts, last words, things that didn't come up tonight that you thought should have, or things that did come up and you just want to reinforce for our audience? Nora?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I would just say that I think, so many of the questions, and this is true for the security questions, of course, but since my areas of privacy, I'll talk a little bit about that. So often we think about privacy in terms of the choices that we're making to protect ourselves. But I think what we really need to be focused on is really kind of talking to regulators and legislators about things that can be done to put the onus on the organizations and companies that are doing things that we don't like around privacy. It's too much to ask individuals to safeguard themselves, to make all of these choices about privacy in ways that are consistent with our own preferences. And what we really need to be doing is putting more pressure on companies, possibly through regulation, to take some responsibility for the ways in which they are collecting and using personal information.
Well stated. AJ, parting thoughts?
I think the only thing I can offer for a lot of the folks that have asked questions, or folks who are watching this live, is just to be on the lookout for anything that it's not kosher, if you will. And just stay from any malicious attacks and be safe as much as you possibly can, because there are people out there, their goal in life is just to extract money for individuals who are not as sophisticated as we'd like them to be in terms of system securities and cybersecurity.
Great, very important, AJ. Thank you. David?
Yeah, I would say if you're thinking about buying a new product, whether it be an app or a device or a service, to actually spend a little time inquiring about the privacy and security practices of that company or of that product. Of course, you could try to read their privacy policy, but also try to read some reviews. There are often expert reviews conducted by third-party uninvolved organizations, something like Consumer Reports, for example, that will give you a sense of whether that product is likely to be behaving in a way that is respectful of its customers. And also, when you install or configure or set up the product, whether it be a device or an app, to pay attention to the configuration. For example, if it has a password, make sure that you reset it, not use the default password that comes out of the box. And to consider carefully, the configuration about who has access and under what conditions, because those are often the most common mistakes that allow unexpected people to have access to the information. For example, to the live stream of your webcam that you just set up, or that baby cam, that nanny cam you've set up in the kid's bedroom. Those are unfortunately all too common and are easily resolved by a few minutes of care when you set it up.
Great. Thank you so much. So as we bring this session to a close, I want to remind everybody that this episode, as well as about 50 other episodes that we've previously recorded, will be available as soon as we're done on our Facebook and YouTube channels. You can view them, you can share them online. Now, typically, we do get hundreds of views after we've finished our live broadcast, so it happens quite frequently. And then we also want to let you know that we are increasing our telecasts to public access TV stations across the country. I think we show up in around 8 states right now, but recently we have added places from Newport, Vermont to Missoula, Montana to Fort Wayne, Indiana. So we welcome all those folks and thank your companies for adding us to their lineup. So I want to thank everybody tonight. I want to thank the audience for showing up, for joining, tuning in, and submitting those questions. I hope everybody will join me in extending a very warm, heartfelt welcome for our panelists this evening. They always go over and above to give us both their time and their expertise, and we certainly appreciate it. Next month, on April 21st at 7 p.m., we will be discussing the exciting new technologies and features that are being developed in both heating and cooling systems and will be delivered both home and commercial applications in the new heat pumps. So hopefully that will be another very interesting case for us to discuss. So we look forward to seeing you next month. We hope you enjoyed this as well as we did, and maybe you learned some things along the way. So from everybody here at Science Cafe to all of you out there, we hope you had a great St. Patrick's Day. Have a great rest of your evening, and good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.